Hey, everybody, we have such a special guest. I told you this is going to be the most amazing guest I've ever had on the show, and I am not going to let you down. You know, you guys, most of you know I was a Protestant for 30 years, and I spent some times in Assemblies of God Pentecostal church, and every Wednesday we had testimony night. And I remember I used to always, copy Carmen, the late Carmen Licardella. And I used to come in and say, okay, guys, all right, it's testimony night. And then we'd have like a little competition. Well, God did this for me this week. Well, God did that for me this week. And today's guest is Miss Vera Marie Calandra. And when you hear her testimony, it's a mic drop. All us Pentecostals will shut up and like, okay, you got us all beat. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Miss Vera Marie Calandra. How are you today, ma'am?
I'm good, Rob. Thank you very much for having me on today.
Thanks. Now, I told Vera I just need to do a quick little qualifier for my Protestant friends and family, because actually my oldest son sells timeshares down here in Orlando, and he met a couple that said they knew your parents. He didn't remember their names because he walked so many people through. And he said, because he called me, and when I came back to the church, my three youngest children came to the Catholic Church with me, but my two oldest boys stayed evangelical. They're not anti-Catholic like I was by no means, but they're just more comfortable in the Baptist church, in the non-denominational churches they're in. So he said, you ever hear of St. Padre Pio? And I said, yeah. And he said, why? I met a woman and a man who said they went to church with a couple whose daughter was healed. So this is the first I've heard about you. This is just a couple of weeks ago. I Googled you and I was like, oh my goodness, this is the most amazing testimony I ever heard in my life. And I really wanted to talk to you. So here you are. But as a Protestant, I know they're going to have a million arguments. So I'm going to do a video on saints, why we have communion of the saints, and we ask them to pray. But real quick, if you're a Protestant watching, just go to Revelations 5:8 and 8:3, where you'll see the saints praying for us. They're in heaven praying for us. In Hebrews chapter 11, St. Paul's talking about all the saints of the Old Testament. And then he goes on in chapter 12 to say we have a great cloud of witnesses cheering us on. So the saints know what we're doing and they're cheering us on. And it's funny because these are two of the four books that Martin Luther said weren't inspired by God. I wonder why, but that's another story. And then Jesus himself said the saints in heaven watch us. He said, if one sinner repents, there's more rejoicing in heaven than if 99 righteous people just stay righteous. So we know, and you say, oh, well, we shouldn't be talking to saints. They're dead and gone. Well, Jesus is our greatest example. And he talked to Elijah and Moses. You see that in the Transfiguration. So, and then relics, we're going to be talking about relics today, I'm sure. In the Old Testament, you see the dead man thrown into a pit. And when he touched the bones of Elisha, he came alive. And the church for 2,000 years has been seeing people miraculously healed with touching the bones of the saints. And then you see, even in the New Testament, St. Paul, people took his handkerchiefs to the sick that weren't near him. They touched his handkerchief and they were healed. This is biblical, guys. This is biblical. What you're about to hear is the most biblical thing you will ever hear. What my guest has experienced is ancient Christianity that hasn't changed. You guys have changed. We haven't changed. So with that, tell us your amazing story. Start from the beginning.
Sure thing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was born in spring of 1966. I'm one of six children. I'm number 5. But prior to my birth, my parents, both Italians on both sides of their family, we owned a small Italian delicatessen where we were originally from in Norristown. So my parents were known in the community, and we were also right across from our very, very Italian Catholic church.
That's awesome.
It was built by Italians. So there was a lot of Italian in the community. And being that my father was very known, someone had given him a book on Padre Pio. And he, of course, brought it home to my mother and shared it with mom and whatnot. And, regular family doing, the everyday, the Sunday mass and whatnot, but not really needing of God, if you know what I mean.
Okay. Yeah, that's a Catholic. I grew up like that. Yep.
Correct. Until you really need God. So of course that book on Padre Pio was simply put on the shelf until the spring of 66 when I came along and they felt that they needed God more than the daily Sunday Mass. So I was immediately brought down to Children's Hospital when I was born with massive urinary tract defects. And it was, the surgeon at the time was Dr. C. Everett Koop down at Children's Hospital. And he did everything, as they say, to keep me comfortable. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So he's the guy who became the Surgeon General. I think Ronald Reagan, Surgeon General.
Yes, that is correct.
Wow, that in itself is pretty amazing. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
But he has a great history, actually, Dr. Koop. He was one of the first surgeons actually who separated the conjoined twins.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Hospital, way back.
So your mom took you to the best.
So actually, no, I was taken right from my mom and brought right down to Children's Hospital because the local hospital that I was born at, my dad named me, gave me mom's name, and she didn't even see me until weeks after, because back then they kept women in the hospital after birth for, not just the 24 hours nowadays, but, a good 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
So I did not see mom. The nurse at the Sacred Heart Hospital where I was born, she baptized me, and I was off in an ambulance.
Wow,
was not going to live. Basically take her right down and see what they can do to keep her comfortable. And in the first 2 years, I had many surgeries to make me comfortable. Simply, that was the words that Dr. Koop kept using with my parents, until he said that there's really no more we can do for her in 1968, and her bladder needs to be removed. The best thing you should do is prepare, be in touch with the funeral director, because it won't be long after that, because you simply cannot live without a bladder.
Wow.
So mom and dad in Philadelphia, there was many, St. John Newman, St. Rita, they were doing all of the local cathedrals and churches, if you will, dedicated to the saints, but they were not getting their prayers answered. I continued to get worse and worse and worse. And then mom remembered a book that she put on her shelf, and at the time I was home and I was on her lap, home meaning out of Children's Hospital, because the first 2.5 years of my life, that is primarily where I was.
Wow.
And she took that book and she started reading it, and she smelled a beautiful aroma of roses engulfed her head.
Praise God.
What do you want? We need help. And she heard what she described as a locution, but you would say an inner calling.
Wow.
Your little girl to me, and do not delay.
Wow.
And with that is exactly what she did. My sister Christina is the youngest. She was born in July of 1968. Of course, mom was still nursing her. So I was about 2.5. Christina was weeks old when we made that journey over to Italy. And we had the oldest with us, my brother Michael. And he was a big 11-year-old, because back then, as mom would say, everything was cloth diapers. So it was 11 suitcases with clothing, but majority cloth diapers. And of course, she didn't know where she was going. Where is San Giovanni Rotondo? Where is it? No one knows. She spoke no English. No Italian.
No Italian.
Nothing like that. We had no friends. You get off with 11 suitcases standing in the Rome airport, and where do you go from there? You hail down a taxi, which of course was more than one taxi, and you say, I need to get to the train station. Where is this San Giovanni Rotondo? Up in the mountains. The Padre Pio's monastery is in the Gargano Mountains of San Giovanni Rotondo. And the best way to get there was the train, the local train. So we were on board of the train, and it was in the heat. Now, in Italy back then, there was no ice. Forget about air conditioners. Bottled water was non-existent, nothing like that. But as the trip went on, we all started getting sicker and sicker.
Oh my goodness.
Just ask Padre Pio, you've brought me across the ocean. Now you need to help me to get to you. And with that, a man came out of nowhere and handed her a bottle of water through the window. She went to say thank
Wow.
you, and there was no one there.
Wow. That's
So
awesome.
that she felt was Padre Pio. Again, he was making her journey doable, but not easy, because she was
Wow.
asking for a big grace.
Wow.
We, of course, finally did get to San Giovanni Rotondo because the train took you to the bottom of the mountain of San Giovanni Mountain, and that was the city of Foggia. Then you had to get up the mountain, and again, no, the language barrier was great. We get to San Giovanni Rotondo, get up the mountain, and we were stayed in, it would be equivalent today to our bed and breakfast, but it
Okay.
was very, very sparse, very
I
sparse.
bet.
The next morning, everyone went up to the mountain to hear Padre Pio. His masses started at 5 a.m. and they lasted for 3 or 4 hours. And then
Wow.
we were told to just go wait in this corridor, because at this time, Padre Pio was very old, very, very old, and he was in a wheelchair.
Wow.
So
your mom had to wait with a bunch of people.
yes, and it's an emotional situation,
I
because
bet.
when
I
we
was
go
getting
back to
emotional. You
Italy,
tell me when you were a baby, and I don't. I just met you today.
when we do go back to Italy, we were there in 2018 on a family trip with my father, and you just go and stand in that corridor, and before graffiti was cool, Mom actually scraped her name
Wow.
when she was there in the wall of the corridor.
Good
And on one
Italian
trip
girl.
after that, yeah, exactly. One trip after that, we found it, and it was really neat.
That's
So
awesome.
the first meeting, it was, you were told to keep your head covered, keep your arms covered. You were seeing Padre Pio, didn't care how hot it was outside. You were reverent. You were dressed humbly and modest.
Wow.
You knelt on the ground, and the wheelchair would really, and it was a very, very, probably not even a full 6-foot wide corridor, because it was in the original monastery part of where Padre Pio lived. And the wheelchair just went through, and it basically just he looked at her and he passed her.
Mm.
Well, again, remember, she's an Italian, but at this point, 2 very, very sick children from dehydration. You go to Italy back in the 60s, 70s, don't drink the water, don't do this. So we all got quite sick, and Mom was actually even more depleted from nursing Christina.
Wow, that's right.
So she went back that night, and she saw a friar, and she said, I came from America. I have a dying daughter. Now my infant is sick. We are all sick. Padre Pio called me here. What does he want from me?
Wow.
What does he want? He says, she demanded another meeting, and he's like, no one gets a private meeting with Padre. And she's like, but he's brought me here, but you don't understand the journey we made. So he said, do you want to see Padre Pio? And at this time, it was like a lottery event to see Padre Pio. It was truly just tickets.
Wow.
Because the masses were so packed, his masses, and they lasted so long. And as she put it, the second time she went to mass, 5 a.m. up at 3:30, 4 o'clock to prepare everyone. And she was standing in the last pew in the church, and she thought, I will never get in that corridor now to see Padre Pio. Padre Pio has his ways. She made it to the corridor with us, knelt down, and this time Padre Pio's wheelchair stopped right in front of her.
Wow.
And their eyes met, and she was just, again, Italian. She was going to unload on him. She heard that he can understand languages, and he'll understand what I'm saying. And I'm going to ask him, what do you want of me? You made me come here. Now we're all sicker. My dying child is even worse. My infant is now very sick. What do you want? And in that moment, when their eyes locked, as she put it, she spoke to him through her heart.
So no words were spoken.
No words passed her lips.
Wow.
And that is when she made her promise. Make a miracle so that all will believe.
Wow. And did she hear him speak to her heart without his lips?
No, it was just simply their eyes locked. He took his hand with, of course, the glove on it from the wound, and he pushed it up into her face, and she was able to kiss the back of his wounded, stigmatic hand. He
Wow.
blessed myself, Christina, Michael, and her, and he touched us all on the heads. The
Wow.
next day, we were on a plane back to Philadelphia, and I say, the Italian in the community thing, because the people that came into my dad's store, they were all praying for us when they heard out.
Sure.
And of course, there were those that really made fun of my mother for bringing a dying child to
Oh, sure.
Europe, don't know where you're going. And as she said, there was a crowd of people waiting to see if you were dead when I brought you home.
Wow.
And, there were those, well, how could you do that? Take her on a plane. And as she said, that was the first meal you ate in 2.5 years on your own.
Wow.
She said, we were on TWA, she said, and you wanted a hamburger.
TWA.
That's what you got.
That's amazing.
So Dr. Coop, of course, he did not go along with the plan of
I bet.
taking the dying child out of the country. So he simply said, well, if she's alive when you bring her home, bring her back in.
Wow.
And we'll run tests. So yes, I was alive. And weeks after that, Mom was in the kitchen ironing. And, at that time, TV was in the kitchen. And she heard that Padre Pio had died.
Wow.
So we got back. We saw Padre Pio September 1st of 1968. You come back, you readjust, you go back to the hospital and whatnot. So it was just a matter of weeks. And that moment, she understood his calling of come quickly and do not delay. Padre Pio knew he was going to die, but of course, my mother did not.
That is amazing. That is amazing.
And December 11 of 1968, I was taken back to Children's for x-rays. And I actually have a copy of the original x-ray. And he basically said, I don't know what to say, because where there was no bladder that I had removed, there is now what he called a rudimentary bladder that has grown.
Hallelujah.
Whatever you're doing, take her home and keep doing it.
So this is a documented medical healing. This is documented. This is medical. There's no argument. The proof
There is
isn't.
not. And I do have letters from Dr. Coop, actually, when Mom was over there to see if the grace, because we never called it a miracle, because people take miracles in different directions. We're always very, very careful. And miracles do have to be documented and approved by Holy Mother Church. So we always said that the family received a grace.
Okay.
Of the healing. And because you have to remember, Padre Pio was still alive when this all took place. So it could not be used as a miracle for his canonization.
Okay. So
that only happens after death.
And it has to be 2 or 3 miracles after death? Is that?
Yes, it is usually 3 miracles after death.
Okay.
I think John Paul, they only use 2 miracles, or maybe even 1.
Okay.
St. John Paul. So my grace is not considered a miracle that made Padre Pio become a saint.
Okay.
Because it was prior to his death. And that is documented from when we went. I mean, the airline tickets all say when we were there.
That is amazing. So, and to have C. Everett Koop, the doctor, to confirm this grace is even more amazing to me. It's like God wanted, he was giving you the best of the best priest we had and the best doctor we had. So he was covering both the natural and the supernatural. That is amazing. And when you were telling me about your mom, it reminded me of when Jesus was telling the story. I think it was Luke 11. And he said, if someone comes to your house and you have nothing to feed them at midnight, if you go to your neighbor and knock on the door and say, hey, can you give me some bread? Can you give me just 3 loaves of bread? They're going to say, get away. Are you crazy? But keep knocking and knocking and they'll give you the bread. That was your mom. She was knocking. She wasn't going to leave till Padre Pio Senior.
Correct.
Wow. What a great, that's the Bible coming alive to me. That's
in
You know,
May
the
of
lesson from Jesus.
1969, we made a Thanksgiving trip to back over to San Giovanni Rotondo with my father, and she went to see the friars, and she says, "Okay," she says, "I made a promise to Padre Pio. What can I do?" And they're like, "Oh God, it's this crazy Italian woman again. What do you want to do?" She says she made a promise that she took seriously, and what to make Padre Pio known. So they gave her a few prayer leaflets, and again, my father having the deli, people would ask updates. So he says, "Oh, we just got back from Italy, and here's some leaflets." Then they were the prayers then to Padre Pio,
Oh,
because
that's
it was going
awesome.
on over a year, well, going on a year now of his passing, and the friars knew. They knew Padre Pio was something special, and that he was going to grow. There is a whole room in the monastery dedicated simply to the millions of pieces of mail that he received.
Wow.
Walls, 4 walls, picture it, floor to ceiling, stacked with mail.
Wow.
And it was just absolutely incredible.
That's
And the work that
incredible.
he did with the US soldiers that basically paved the road to San Giovanni.
I didn't even know
um,
that. That's
Yes,
awesome.
World War II. There's many pictures of our US soldiers. We have actually interviewed some of our US soldiers that served Padre Pio's mass.
That is awesome. I'm a veteran, so that means a lot to me. It's awesome. That is
That's
awesome. My deacon was so excited that I was having you on because he does a Pio prayer meeting every Monday night, and actually he said he met you, but you probably don't remember him. It was years ago. Deacon John. Um, he's Italian from Jersey, like me. He's got an Italian last name I can't even pronounce. But Deacon John, 2005, had a heart attack. Was on life support. The doctor said he would need a transplant. They said his heart is too weak to do a bypass, so they needed to do a transplant. And then someone knew um, that his family had this devotion to Padre Pio, and somehow they got a first class relic from one of the friars in Italy with Padre Pio's blood on it, and they touched him with it. They anointed him with Padre Pio oil. They prayed for him, and the doctor's like, "Well, maybe you don't need a heart transplant." This was 2005, and he's as strong as an ox today. Never had the transplant. Actually, just came off of a pilgrimage in Lourdes where he's walking around in the heat, and he's, like I said, he's strong as an ox. He preaches with power. He's always got a funny story to tell. He's full of life and energy. Um, so I know this is real, and I just wonder how many more stories have you heard? I'm sure people must contact you where they touched a relic or something. Have you heard of miracles like that or graces since he's passed?
Yes, we do actually. And one that has, I'm gonna, not one of the most popular, but one of the most recognized that has been talked about so much, is the story of Paul Walsh, the young man who was in a deadly car accident. His brain and everything was, his skull was totally crushed.
Oh my goodness.
And this is while we were still in Norristown. I want to say it was 1984 or 86. And my father had brought the glove of Padre Pio because the mom had heard about it, and again, it was her last ditch hope, because the doctors are like, the skull does not come back. There's so much massive brain damage. The eye sockets were totally crushed. Everything,
My God.
his brain fluid was just literally all over, the street and everything. And my father had brought the glove to Crozier Chester Medical, and his mom was there at the hospital at the time, and little by little Paul started making a recovery,
Wow.
and his skull went back together, the fluid stopped, and Padre Pio actually came to visit him, and his
Wow.
roommate said, "Paul, your uncle was here last night." And he says, "What do you mean?" He said, "Yeah, he was dressed in a long brown robe." He said, "I think it was your Uncle Paul." And he's like, "No, he doesn't dress like that." And then his mom showed him a picture of Padre Pio and the roommate, and he said, "That's the guy who was here last night.
Wow.
He was
Praise the
standing
Lord.
over you."
Wow. And I tried to keep that story short because when about my deacon, because when he tells a story, he's like me, he'll go on. And I said, well, I'm gonna have to keep it short, but I'll have to bring this up. In 2015, uh, his cardiologist said, well, now your heart's strong enough. So for like future, longevity, we think we should give you the bypass now. And he said before he went into surgery, he seen as clear as day, his father walked in and smiled, and right next to him saying, Padre Pio, bless him. He said, I seen it as clear as I seen my dad. And his heart surgery went perfect. And that was what I say, 2058 years ago.
Mhm.
And he's as strong as ox. So as a former Protestant, when I hear this sounds so strange to me. But I mean, God is God. He can do anything he wants with his saints in heaven. I mean, Elijah and Moses came down and spoke with Jesus, right? How often have people reported seeing, and what do they call this? Is there a name for this when St. Padre Pio visits people?
Well, Padre Pio bilocated also during his lifetime.
Okay, so it was in
He
two
was still
places at
alive
one time.
when Saint Teresa was canonized, and he
Wow.
was when Padre Pio went to San Giovanni, to the monastery, Our Lady of Grace. He never left that monastery when he was there. He was there for 50 years,
Wow.
and around 50 years, and he never left the monastery. The only time he really left was to go to vote, and that was to do his
Wow.
civic duty.
Wow, that's
But he
interesting.
was seen in many places, many hospitals and whatnot. And so, yes, it is documented that Padre Pio, but while he was alive, he was seen at St. Teresa's canonization, while he
Wow.
never left the monastery. But even after death, yes,
You've been seen
it
plenty
is
of times.
reported that he has been seen. We do get a lot of, we call them graces received. And Padre Pio's, one of his saying is, once I lift up a soul, I never let go of it.
Wow.
And it's true. Once he has you, he has you. Because my mother's journey was a journey out of love and blind faith, as I put it, because she did not know what she was going to find when she finally made it to the mountain in
Wow.
San Giovanni Rotondo. He could have been gone. Maybe she missed the calling in a sense. If she didn't heed it as fast as she did, and again, it was only weeks later,
Yeah.
passed away. If she would have said, okay, well, I have A, B, and C to do because I have 6 children, let me put it off, but she didn't. But
Interesting.
that is your faith. She was led by faith, a mother's love, devotion, and of course, my father saying, yeah, go ahead. There's not much to say.
Your old man wasn't going to stop her, I don't think.
No, not at all. Not at all.
That is so awesome. When I was a Protestant, I believed in healing, and I've seen some, but there were so many fake guys, and you knew they were fake because they drove Lamborghinis and Rolls Royces. And when I came to Catholic Church, I was amazed that the healing that I see, more miracles happen in the Catholic Church than all the other denominations combined. And you see Padre Pio, and he seemed like he lived a life of poverty. Like
Yes.
he could have been out there, with the gold and everything, and he chose to live a life of poverty. And other than Pope Francis, he's the only other Christian I ever heard talk about detachment to money, detachment to materialistic things. Do you think that his detachment to things that we think are important is what allowed him to be used so mightily by God?
Yes, but you have to remember Padre Pio's undertaking, for as much as he was detached from worldly things, um, Padre Pio also had a hospital bill, La Casa
Mm,
Sollievo della Sofferenza, which is right next door to the monastery.
okay.
So, and people were sending the money in Padre Pio's name. We get so many, and we call them relics. Um, my mom sent this check over to Padre Pio, and look, his signature is on the back.
That's
So
all.
Padre Pio he was involved. It's just
He
where it
just didn't
takes
keep it for himself.
exactly,
So
exactly.
it's okay to raise money. It's just not okay to indulge yourself with that money, I guess, is the lesson.
Mhm.
Wow, that's awesome. So he used that money to build a hospital. That is amazing.
Yes,
That
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 was one
is
of the works of Padre Pio. Also, the Way of the Cross, the Via Crucis.
it's awesome. And I understand like he lived in just a little dirty, cold room. Is that did I get that right?
Well, the monastery was very humble. It was very, very modest. It was basically stone and marble,
Yeah, that's what I heard.
carved out of the side of a mountain. and his they call him a cell,
Okay.
was very small with one window, and just the bed and the sink and a chair and a little desk. All the
Wow.
friars, all of their rooms were like that.
They're all okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, in the beginning uh, of his miraculous life, the church didn't believe it was real, right? They thought he might have been crazy. Is that true?
That is correct. Yes, Padre Pio had the stigmata, the wounds of our Lord, and he also had the wound of the where the centurion pierced our Lord on the cross to make sure he was dead.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow. So
and
they
he
all
also
three
had
places bled?
Padre Pio bled in his hands, his feet, and his side.
Wow. Wow.
Yes.
Now, how did the church come to believe it? Because today, when I tell people that, they still say, "Oh, well, he could have faked it. He could have did this." How did the church come to believe that it was true? How did they prove it?
The Vatican sent many doctors and whatnot there to test Padre Pio. And one of the tests that Padre Pio had to endure, um, because they said he created these wounds from carbolic acid.
Okay.
So they stuck a rod, like a 5-inch rod, through his hand directly through, because you could read a newspaper through the hole in Padre Pio's hand.
Wow.
So they stuck a rod through it and then sealed it with wax and then wrapped it with a bandage and left it in there for a matter of days. And when they went back to go take it out, the rod simply moved out. There was another, was removed. There was like not even any skin or anything like that that came with it.
Wow.
And the hole obviously was still there. So Padre Pio wore gloves, half gloves, with the fingers out. And the only time he removed them was during the consecration of the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass.
Wow. Wow. So before they realized that he was truly a saint or on his way to becoming a saint, he was disciplined, right? They disciplined him. What kind of discipline did he have to undertake?
They did because Padre Pio had so many people coming to him. Padre Pio spent like 18, 19 hours in the confessional. And again, that was
Wow.
almost like a lottery, okay?
Wow.
Because he
Wow.
could read souls, he could read your heart. He knew when you were making a true confession, a confession that you were truly sorry for the sins you had committed. Um, so he even admonished people in the confessional. But
Wow.
he, how can I say, he had once said, "Do you think our good Lord gave me these wounds as decoration?" Because
Wow.
someone asked him, "Are they painful?" And that was his response.
Wow. So
His
they
feet
were
were so
painful.
swollen. Yes. Yes, his feet were constantly swollen. He could not even close the buckles on his sandals.
Wow. That's amazing.
Mhm.
So the discipline, they wouldn't let him say mass. Is that what
Yes,
was
for a
that one of
number of
his?
years, because they wanted to slow down the number of people to see if it was real or not. Again, Padre Pio went on through a lot of testing on the earth, on this earth. There were even bishops and cardinals that were not fond of him.
Wow.
That even actually, one, I don't remember which one it was, actually apologized.
Oh,
Very
praise
rare.
God.
Yeah, very
While
rare.
he was still alive?
Yes,
Okay, good,
yes, he
good.
did.
Wow.
There are a lot of priests that do go over to see Padre Pio. Uh, John Paul II went to him, went to confession to Padre Pio,
Wow.
and he had told him, that kind of let him know where his life was going to take him. Put it
That
to it
is
that way.
that is awesome. So how did Padre Pio react? I see so many, which
He
was
did.
kind of startling when I came back to the Catholic Church, to see Catholics that have been Catholics longer than me on YouTube,
Mhm.
like really talking disrespectful to our Pope and to the hierarchy. Uh, and they're not really even being punished or anything. They're just mad at him for whatever reason. They're mad at the Pope or whatever reason. Every day it's something different. But
Mhm.
how did Padre Pio actually was unjustly and unfairly disciplined? So if anybody had a reason to be upset, I would imagine it would be him. How did he react to that discipline from the church?
Obedience.
Wow.
Padre Pio would always be obedient. You kiss the hand of Holy Mother Church.
Amen. What a lesson for us
Whether he
today.
was being, right, chastised, you're correct, he was taken away from the public. And the people of San Giovanni were not happy about that at all, that they could not see Padre Pio. He was removed from public mass, confessions, and whatnot.
He had the ability, if he chose, to be another Martin Luther, but instead of Germany, I bet he could have did it in Italy. If he wanted to be a Protestant, if he wanted to bash the Pope at the time, if he wanted to bash the hierarchy, he would have had people follow him, I bet. But he chose obedience. That's
Absolutely.
Saint
Absolutely.
Faustini. I read a quote recently by Saint Faustini. She said, "The devil can imitate humility, but the devil cannot imitate obedience." And he's a powerful testament of a saint, of what we should all, aspire to be.
There's so many different topics that you can choose to talk on when you're speaking of Padre Pio, like the beatings. You're talking about the devil. That's where I was taking that.
Yeah,
Is when Padre Pio would get beaten daily by the devil.
like oppressed. Like I had a psychiatrist on that, Dr. Gallagher, and he said he's witnessed people being oppressed, and he said literally Christians being hit by the devil. So is that what you mean, like physically?
Correct. Yes, our
Wow.
Lord would allow it for the salvation of souls. So
Right.
he
And
did
Saint
it. He accepted it for the salvation of our souls. So you would see Padre Pio with bruises on his chin, black eyes, and whatnot. And then when he couldn't take it anymore, he would yell and scream for Our Lady. And
Wow.
Our Lady, the Blessed Mother, always came to his rescue, usually with Saint Michael.
Just like your mother came to your rescue. Isn't that amazing?
And
That
they
is,
would find a pillow under Padre Pio's head, the friars, the next morning. And he's like, "How did you get this pillow?" And he's like, "Our Lady came."
wow. Because the friars didn't have pillows.
Oh, yes, they did. Oh, definitely,
Oh,
definitely.
okay.
But this is like a little pillow that he kept on his chair, a little blue one.
Okay. That
Mhm.
is amazing. That is amazing. And and even the scriptures in the Bible, St. Paul said that he had a spirit that harassed him. He seemed like he was experiencing the same thing. And three times he said, "The Lord, please take this." And three times the Lord said, "My grace is sufficient." And he allowed it to
Yes,
keep him from becoming conceited. So maybe the Lord allowed this for whatever reason, like you said, to save souls. So
yes.
that's amazing. I never heard that story. That is amazing.
Mhm.
That is amazing. Um, and I noticed, again, like I said, when I came back to the church, one of the things that attracted me was Pope Francis. And I know a lot of people like to bash him for whatever reason they feel they have the right. But I noticed Pope Francis talks about the church of the poor and detachment of money. And I see, the little bit I know about Padre Pio, um, he's the same way. He seems like he's more concerned about the poor and the hurting than most of us are. What do you think he would have thought of Pope Francis? You think they would have got along? You think he would have?
Pope Francis does try to do his best to keep along with the Franciscan rule, which is poverty, chastity, and obedience.
Okay. Okay. Nice.
So yes, the friars do, even in this day and age, the friars still live by those vows, just
That's
like
all.
Saint Francis, who also had the wounds, but Saint Francis was a deacon of the church. He was not a priest. And that's why to this day, Padre Pio is still the only priest with the wounds of our Lord.
Wow. I didn't know that. So St. Francis of Assisi was a deacon.
Correct. He was a brother.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting. That's very interesting. So I know you're a busy lady, so I want to keep you here all day, although I have a lot more questions. But I want you to tell my viewers how they can learn more. Can you tell us about your center up there in Pennsylvania and how we can learn more about this great saint? And oh, and before I forget, I do got a question I want to ask you before. Um, I heard the movie with Shia LaBeouf. I didn't see it, but I heard that Padre Pio says the F word in the movie. I don't know if you've heard that.
Yes,
Do you,
that is so not
that
true.
that is so not true. Thank you. That's just Hollywood being Hollywood, correct? Right?
When Padre Pio was a child, literally a child, playing with other children in Pietrelcina, and those other children were using foul language, Padre Pio would run from them immediately. Now that's
Wow.
a child. You think he's going to do that
No.
when he's got millions of people coming to see him? That's what I don't understand why that went in that direction in that film. I have not seen that film.
Well, if you watch it, I would love that once it. I don't think it's out in theaters yet. I've been looking, I can't find it, but when it comes out, I would love to get your review of that. I really would. What you say is true, because I'm sure there's going to be some truth, like anything else, and some lies. And the world just doesn't understand. Like saying Padre Pio was a passionate Italian. You know, sometimes I get passionate on my show, and people are like, "Whoa," you know. I'm like, you're not cursing, you're not sinning, you're just passionate. You know, you're trying to make a point. So I don't think they understand the difference of righteous anger and just vulgarity and worldly anger, right? You think maybe?
Padre Pio did have a temper. I mean, like, don't let me mislead you,
He's
because
Italian, of course he did.
well, women would pull on his habit, pull on his cord, and he would hit them with their cord, okay? But not foul language.
Yeah,
You know, he would say, I mean, the man was constantly in pain. Now,
yeah,
you have someone pull on you when you're in pain, your hands, or try and constantly, Italian women, they're going to try and kiss whatever they can, and they like went to his feet. Do you know what I'm saying? Touch his
yeah.
hand and whatnot. So yes, you know, back off a little bit, but
Okay.
not that kind of language. And that really does hurt, because no, I've not seen the film, and I feel that we here at the center, especially my family, know Padre Pio quite intimately. And I do wish that the filmmakers would have come here, to be honest with you, because
Yeah.
our center is so beautiful, so knowledgeable, and we have recreated in our museum different parts of Padre Pio's life, including, you know, his cell where he died, his family country farm home in Piano Romana, parts of Pietrelcina, his tomb in San Giovanni Rotondo where he was exhumed from. And it's just, they would have, I think, gotten a whole lot more, but it didn't work out that way for whatever reason.
Well, let's pray that a wealthy Catholic will want to redo the film and come see you. Maybe Mel Gibson will make a visit to you.
I I do wish something like that would happen,
It could
because
happen. You know, anything could happen. I'm telling you, anything can happen. You know, anything can happen.
we have never reached out to anyone like that, but we had a gentleman call us and say, "You guys should be on Unsolved Mysteries. Get and we told him, we don't do that. You
The
want to do
mystery
it,
solved.
you tell them to call us." And like 2 weeks later, we had production agents from California calling. This guy made it that far to Unsolved Mysteries, and my episode and the Paul Walsh episode are one of still the most requested, and
No
it was done in
way. Oh,
1994.
I gotta Google that. That's awesome. I gotta check that out. That is amazing. I never knew that. It's
But
amazing.
our center grew from our kitchen table in Norristown to our first location here in Barto, which was a barn, to the 106 acres that we sit on now. And I don't know if you've ever been to our website, but you could see a lot of it. It is padrepio.org is our website, and we have many events coming up, especially the biggest event is our novena in September. So we do
Okay.
a 9-day novena prior to his feast day on September 23rd.
That's awesome. My deacon also told me you have a church that's identical to the church in Italy that he said
Yes,
mass. Is that
we
correct?
did a replica of Our Lady of Grace Capuchin Friary of the small Chiesa Antica, the small church where Padre Pio said most of his masses.
And do you hold mass there?
Yes, we do.
Wow, that would be
Yeah.
amazing to have mass
And
there.
Rob, I had something special that I wanted to share with you.
Okay.
In our museum, we have many personal effects, authentic, authentic
Okay.
personal effects of Padre Pio. And I kind of don't know how to do this, but this is a glove that Padre Pio wore.
Wow.
And in it, it is considered a first-class relic because there are still crusts of blood of Padre Pio's in it.
Wow.
We do have, you had mentioned relics. There's different classes of relics. First, second, and third. First is body. Second is belonging. Third is anything touched to first or second. But like I said, even though this glove is belonging, these gloves are not washed, because when Padre Pio took off his gloves during a consecration, some crusts of blood would fall on the altar, and of course some remained in his glove. So of
Okay.
course that's the first and second mixing. And
Wow.
mom, basically our family, during our Thanksgiving trips back, and when the friars finally took her serious that yes, she wants to make him known, we spent summers there learning about Padre Pio and his charisms, and that's how our center is run still to this day. Padre Pio's charisms, his likes, his dislikes, how can I say, at the hands of Father Alessio and Father Joseph. And Father Joseph is a story unto himself. He was born and raised full Irish, only child, born and raised in Brooklyn, Irish, and his father was a caretaker, was a
Wow.
funeral director.
Wow, that's
And out
interesting.
of curiosity, he went over, he took a trip during the summer to go see this friar on the mountain that's so, because Padre Pio is very, very popular in Ireland to see. And Padre Pio told him to go back to America, take care of his affairs, because when he comes back to San Giovanni, he will never leave San Giovanni.
Wow.
And he did. He became the only American priest in San Giovanni, and
No
he
way.
spoke Italian, beautiful, with a gorgeous Brooklyn accent. And it was just, I could understand him
I thought all
completely.
Italians had a Brooklyn accent.
Mhm. But Father Alessio Parente spent the most time with Padre Pio the last 10 years of his life. And Father
Wow.
Alessio Parente and my mother then traveled all over the United States. She would tell her story, which I don't consider it my story, it's her story. She lived it firsthand. And Father Alessio would talk all about Padre Pio.
Wow. Is
So,
Father Alessio still alive?
no, Father Alessio passed away January 6th of 2000,
Okay.
on Epiphany Day of 2000.
Wow. Wow. Man, you have such amazing knowledge. I'm blessed. I'm so glad you came. You were talking about I keep on ending it, but I keep remembering stuff I'm curious about. You talked about Padre Pio's charisms. And as a Pentecostal Protestant, and now I consider myself a Pentecostal Catholic. Well, I think it's God doesn't change. The Book of Acts is still going on in my view, but I heard he spoke in tongues regularly. Is that true?
Padre Pio, see, that's a term that's more of a New Age term,
Okay,
speaking
so
in tongues. Padre Pio understood different languages,
okay,
and then he would make them understand him.
okay, interesting. Very interesting.
And
Okay,
that's something that here at the center, we do stay away from those kind of terms.
okay. Well, I
Because,
know. I had. I don't know if you know Deacon Ensley. He said through church history, they used more of the term jubilation for a time. They used the term jubilation, and people would jubilate. Joyous, and
mhm.
and unless you had like the gift of Padre Pio to interpret it, you didn't know what was being said. So that's interesting. But so again, if people want to learn about your center, where do they go? Your website, if you want to.
Our website is www.padrepio.org, PADREPIO.org. We're open 7 days a week, Monday through Saturday, 9 to 4:30, and Sundays 11 to 4. We have rosary every day at 11:30, Divine Mercy at 3, and we do try to live stream a lot of that.
That is awesome.
So we do have a YouTube and an Instagram and Facebook.
That is so awesome. And if Mel Gibson is watching, I really recommend you make a movie and you come meet this wonderful woman of God, Vera Marie Calandra, to learn the truth. And again, when that movie does come out, I hope you watch it and you can give us, so we know what's true and what's not. Because like I said, I'm sure there's going to be some true and then some whatever, Hollywood decided to add. But I guess Shia LaBeouf like stayed with some friars, so he thinks that he's got a lot of truth. So I don't know if you heard about that.
Um, Not a whole lot. I didn't have such a great taste in my mouth for the film
Okay. All right.
because I know I didn't think it was actually going to come together correctly. And from what
Okay.
it sounds like, it kind of,
It didn't.
I mean, you have to have sensationalism in a sense to draw people to the film.
Yeah.
Okay. But see, again, our relationship here at the center is so intimate with Padre Pio that we correct people without even knowing we're correcting people. Like my nephew Nicholas, his biggest pet peeve is he's not, say it, Nick. He's not Saint Padre Pio.
He's
He
not?
is Padre Pio. His title when he became saint is Saint Pio of Pietrelcina.
Ah, see, I didn't know that either. I'm sorry, Nicholas. And Nicholas is actually a grandson of Padre
Nicholas
Pio?
no, he's the oldest grandchild of my parents, and his name is Nicholas Pio.
Okay, okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Right.
Okay, so coming from Nicholas Pio, that holds a lot of weight. So I will try and say, I won't promise that I'm not going to forget, but I will try and say it correctly from now on. And when I put it in my title, I'm gonna have to do it right.
And we're located, we're very, I would say centrally located. We get a lot of bus groups from New York and New Jersey. We're like 20 minutes off of 78. An
Okay, I know
hour,
exactly where that is.
yep, about an hour and 10 minutes outside of Philadelphia. 15 minutes from Lehigh Valley Hospital in Allentown. We're
Okay,
right off of the main route, Route 100.
okay, and that's Barto, Pennsylvania.
Bartow, Pennsylvania, and we basically put Bartow on the map.
Yeah, we got a
Because
Bartow, Florida. It's just a little cow town.
you are, but I think it's Bartow.
Yeah, yeah, that's how it is.
Yes,
How's yours?
Barto.
Oh, okay, okay,
And
interesting.
when Padre Pio was beatified, um, in May 2nd of 1999, we had like 25 to 30,000 people here,
Wow.
and it was wonderful. And Mom's promise, which maybe she didn't even know or understand at that time, why we have done and why the family has been entrusted with so many personal belongings of Padre Pio, because not everyone can get over to San Giovanni Rotondo. And that's why we have created what we have. So when they do come here, they feel like they are walking into San Giovanni Rotondo in, like you said, the older church, into Piana Romana and Pietrelcina. So
That's awesome. Well, the next time I go home to New Jersey, I'm definitely taking a drive to Bartow. I promise
I
you.
hope you do. Give a call ahead. I would like to meet you in person.
That would be awesome. And I'm sure my wife would love you. So we'll definitely look forward to that. And again, I want to thank you. This was wonderful. And if you're ever down in Florida, give me a call.
Okay, sounds good. Give Nick
All
some
right.
info. I
All right.
appreciate it. This
All
was
right.
a
Well,
pleasure. Thank you.
thank you. And I think I enjoyed it more than you did, honestly. I know you enjoyed it, but I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.